Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. Author Ben Mears returns to his childhood home of Jerusalem's Lot in search of inspiration for his next book, only to discover his hometown is being preyed upon by bloodthirsty vampires. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Salem's Lot. Hopping into this one, I just want to thank the folks over at HBO Max Warner Brothers Discovery for setting us up with this one. This is our first official kind of screener debut with them. We've never actually gotten anything early from them. But you know, they're trying to toss their hat into the horror game a little bit. They're putting some of these properties they've got onto the streaming service. I know we got a Conjuring series coming up eventually, so you know we'll probably hear a lot more from them. But Salem's Lot, this has been a long time coming. I was trying to remember. I pulled up an article. This thing has been talked about since 2019 was when they officially said, hey, we're greenlighting this. It's going to come out in October of 2020. Now we are here in 2024 and it's dropping on HBO Max and we got a chance to see it. Luke, tell the folks at home a little bit about how you feel about not just this film, but your thoughts on Salem's Lot as a whole, the original, the book, any of that. I know you're a King fan, so I want to get your thoughts in depth on that.
You know, Salem's Lot is a property. I haven't read the book. It's one of the ones that has escaped me. It's on my to-do list. Eventually, I'll get there. But, you know, I did check out the miniseries from Tobe Hooper originally. And, you know, I think there are a lot of great scenes in that film. But overall, it's not something I go back to. I'll watch it every so often, but it's not something I have a complete love for, as a lot of King properties from the late 70s into the 80s. It's just kind of just there for me. You know, I don't know if that's maybe seeing so many vampire flicks, and maybe that being a little bit a harder sell for me. So even going into the new Salem's Lot, this was, you know, plagued with a lot of, when's this coming out? What's going on? What does this look like? Is it going to the theater? Is it going streaming? And then it being pushed back, you know, a full year. So at one point we didn't even know if we were going to get this or if it was ever going to see the light of day. So I wasn't necessarily excited for this one. I just think, you know, once a lot of Stephen King properties start hitting, like when It comes out, I think a lot of studios started just grabbing up King properties, whether people were clamoring for it or not. So this one was just kind of, you know, I was waiting to see if it was going to come out, but I wasn't upset if we didn't ever actually see it. So I got to say, overall, after checking this one out, I gotta say, you know, left me underwhelmed. It just wasn't something that I found unique or different than a lot of the other vampire properties that we've got. So, you know, it continues. Salem's Lot for me is just kind of there.
It's just kind of there. And, you know, that's totally fair. I have actually been listening to the book now for about a week and a half. I've been listening to it at work here and there. It's like almost an 18-hour long audiobook. So I'm about halfway or close to halfway through it. And I do know the mini series pretty well. I had seen it when it was on, I believe, AMC when they were doing their movies things. It was on all the time. So I caught bits and pieces, but I never actually sat down and watched the whole thing until a couple years ago. Just when we had started the podcast, I think I sat down and just watched it just because. And, you know, I enjoyed it enough. I thought it was an interesting take on kind of a 70s vampire film. So this one, I didn't have a lot of faith in. I went into this film very, very just like on the fence of saying, hey, this is not going to be my cup of tea. And, you know, I hate to be this guy because I know we try to give everything, you know, the best, you know, an open mind, I should say, going into it. But like Gary Dauberman is not somebody whose writing I have very much enjoyed. And I wasn't the biggest fan of Annabelle Comes Home. And I, strangely enough, came out of this a bit more positive than you did, Luke, which I kind of surprised the hell out of me, too, because you watched this before me. You gave me your little dissertation report over the phone, and I went into it even, I think, lower expectations. And I found some elements in here that, although you're right, not original, not really doing anything all that different from any other vampire stuff we've seen. I kind of liked the angles that they took that were different from the book and the miniseries. They do there's a clear attempt to try their own thing with this material, and I thought that was pretty admirable. And I think that maybe just my exposure to both and listening to the book so far, like, may have also played into that, because I kind of expected some things and they twisted them on their head a little bit. But overall, I gotta say, I found myself with a bit of a smile on my face by the time this ended, and I didn't think it was all that bad.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a monstrosity of a film. It's something where, like you're saying, they put their own creative stamp on it. Unfortunately for me, it wasn't creative enough because it does
Mhm.
fall within the line of pretty mundane vampire storytelling, where we're not really getting an expansion, any sort of dynamic kind of lore or anything like that. This is kind of, we're following those familiar beats that we do see in a lot of vampire flicks. And, this one almost has that sanitized studio feel to it, where we've had Abigail come out earlier this year, and I thought that was a rather unique take on something. Asked a lot for the ensemble cast, and I think they knocked it out of the park. And did some creative stuff with it. We watched The Vortilac, which is a very smaller budgeted film. And even them, I think looking at that, there are some creative elements in there, especially when we're looking at a period piece, that they really do take advantage of that period storytelling. Now, when you look at Salem's Lot, for me, um, and you compare it to a lot of other King properties, and with how much they expand the actual town characters for a 2-hour film, almost 2-hour film. It's very surface level, and they don't really deep dive into anything or really go into any unique avenues with this thing, where I think that's kind of its biggest X on this film, where you have all the time in the world to really deep dive into this, make the world that it's in feel vibrant, feel alive, like a lot of King properties. And for me, it just falls flat.
And I'll give you that. I think that for sure they could have gone into the town a lot more. There's almost like this surface level attempt at times where they bring in characters that are only there for a split second and then they're gone. And I don't really appreciate that, especially when you're adapting the works of Stephen King, because as we all know, if you've read his books, whole side characters will get chapters dedicated to them. And it's like, I know you can't really do that for a 2-hour film, but it's one of those things where they could have done at least a little bit more, because yeah, it is very one and done. They're here, then they're gone, and then things happen. But I will say that the first half of this film um is very much what you're expecting from Salem's Lot. It's very close to the material, and I think my enjoyment of it almost just amped as the film goes on. Normally, when I watch films like this, especially adaptations that I'm not crazy about, it's a lot of just usually I start to descend as the film goes on with enjoyment. This was very much the opposite for me. I felt like, as the film got on, it was a lot stronger. And I think it's because they clearly started to separate themselves more from the material that we know. They really paid tribute in a lot of ways, and then they kind of did their own thing. And I thought the third act of this film was very fun. It was very cool. There's one element to this that I thought was honestly really creative. And I think the biggest thing that I could have taken from that was, take that out of this movie, take that out of Salem's Lot, put that in another vampire film, and that could have been a really cool set piece. And I know some people are going to ask, like, how do they handle the big antagonist? How do they handle Barlow? Because obviously he's a huge part of the book. He's our Dracula figure. I will say in this, you prepped me by saying that there's a good amount of CGI kind of cleaning up, touching up, as you would say, with that. I didn't hate it at times. I thought there was one sequence in a kitchen where it was really good. But by the third act, I was it felt so Pennywise. It felt so Pennywise at chapter 2 for me that I was like, oh, this is not what I wanted. So yeah, that's another one of those mixed elements for me in this film where it's like, yeah, they clearly showed that they can do it and they can make it look good and look really intimidating and cool. Because to be honest, I love the look in the original Salem's Lot, but a little goofy, little goofy by today's standards. So this one, he looked intimidating, but again, by the time we get to the third act and he's really moving and he's really doing stuff, it gets pretty goofy.
Yeah, and I think there are some unique elements, especially where you're talking into the third act. I think it was just void of atmosphere for me. I guess maybe a time of day or visually what you do see. I think um, to dance around it would have been a little more audio rather than visual, I guess. And then eventually you go into the visual aspect of it. So for me, there's some really rough CGI in that third act as well as we get closer. That as I would see it, it was just kind of eye rolly to me. And then by the time we get to Barlow, there's a scene in here that they want to choice just so they have a visual of it toward the end, and I was like, oh my gosh, wow. So
Mhm.
for me, some of that stuff was pretty jarring, and it kind of inhibited me from enjoying that third act fully. I think the twist or the unveiling, it was for me a few scenes earlier when they were I saw it coming a little bit just because of a reference earlier on in the movie, and I was like, oh, okay, so they think. Unfortunately, I think they thought they were smarter than they were, but for me, it just didn't really work. I didn't find the atmosphere that I was hoping to. I like the angle of an author coming back to his town. I think the characters were there; they just never really dove deeper into them. When you look at something even like the Black Phone, where it's a period piece, they cover a lot of ground with some unique characters, and at times I could see signs in Salem's Lot where it's like, oh, if you just took this one step farther, 2 steps farther, I think this could have been really enjoyable. But they kind of just, here's our characters, here's our instance, let's move on from it. And when you again have an almost 2 hour long film, that's you can cross the ocean and back in movie time there, and they don't do it here.
Yeah, and I will say that for me, I think that although I agree that a lot of the characters are surface level, I personally felt like the actors here did a really phenomenal job with what they were given. I can say that I really enjoyed the cast. I felt like a lot of people had really good chemistry together. The biggest one for me though that I have to give major props to, Lewis Pullman. I mean, we you spoke about him very highly in our first conversation. And I had you seen anything of his other than Strangers and what was the other thing he was in?
Bad Times at the El Royale?
Bad Times at the El Royale.
No,
Yeah, he
I think
was.
that's it.
Yeah, he is definitely somebody that I've had my eye on since. Like I recognized him after I saw Top Gun in Bad Times, and then going back to Strangers Pray at Night. But I think he is so good as Ben Mears here. Like, I mean, the character again doesn't have a ton that differentiates him from his book counterpart or even the original counterpart. Yeah, they do kind of skirt over a lot of things with him, but I think he's just got so much charisma, and he does have some just this essence about him. Just I'd love to take his character or just him in general and put him back into the 70s setting with a vampire or with a werewolf or something, you know what I mean? Like he carried himself so well in this that it does give me the hope and the appeal that this guy's got star power. This is somebody that I could easily see carrying a horror series or a horror film that goes a little bit deeper, whether it be a Dracula or something later on down the road.
Yeah, no, I enjoy Lewis Pullman a ton. I will watch anything that he's in. Obviously, I watch Salem's Lot. This one, I think, that's a testament to the actor Lewis Pullman's ability. Unfortunately, they don't ask much in terms of a script. So yes, he does. he does great with what he's given. Unfortunately, that is not a lot. He's kind of got a subtle performance in here. He's got some relationships in the story as well, but again, unfortunately, they never take them deeper than really surface level things. So I think there's maybe on paper they thought, this instance in this relationship was going to mean a little bit more, or maybe this moment was going to be extended and people were going to be talking about it. Unfortunately, it's a fleeting moment for me, in terms of there's a handful of his relationships with these characters that don't necessarily hit. And, you have a chance to really dive deep into this guy coming back to this town, and odd occurrences happening. And you could really do something creative with that character arc, with the townspeople, him coming back, this kind of interloper character. And unfortunately, it's just about one line, and that's all we get there. So, I think we set the table for some more interesting instances than there actually are. They just never take advantage of them.
And I can say another person that I was really impressed with, but I do think is underwritten in some scenes, but I think it's either the actor or they were able to pick him up in others, was Jordan Peterson Carter, who plays Mark in this. Again, it's a character that is extremely prevalent in the book and extremely prevalent in the original. He's one of the main characters, and I thought that he did excellent towards the later half of this film. Towards the beginning half, it felt very generic. It felt like, we're just trying to get him through. It did feel very like he could have been one of the kids from It, but they're just kind of breezing over everything for him too fast. And then something happens in the film, and then it starts to focus more on him and Lewis Pullman's character. And I thought that the kind of chemistry that those two carried together was very believable and very interesting. I almost would have liked to have seen that continue on with their story, because I just found them to both be very likable, especially in how they work together, because very much Mark's character kind of becomes this kind of surprise to me, where it's like he's taking more on than even some of our adult characters when it comes to the situation they're in. So I do want to give him some props too for being such a young actor. I felt that he carried himself very well.
Yeah, it's hard to cast child actors. We talk about it on the podcast all the time, where
Mm-hmm.
you never really know what you're going to get. And by the time you do, it's either hit or miss, I think some of the child acting in here, it didn't really hit for me. I think Mark's character did. I think was rather well done. I like this kind of, relationship between him and Lewis Pullman as Ben Mears. I think, that's one of my favorite elements of the story, and because I think it works so well. Unfortunately for Mark's character, there's some connective tissue, again, some twists and turns for me that don't really hit. Again, they kind of breeze over some of them, and I feel like they should mean a little bit more than they actually do.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I 100% agree.
And
Yeah.
again, that's probably the biggest X on this film is, you're pushing a 2-hour runtime, and you don't deep dive into really anything or let anything sit. And, for me, this one, as you guessed, did not really hit for me. This will be a proceed with caution for me. It's just, this is a longer watch. This isn't an hour 20. I can't really say, hey, go check this one out, because there isn't just enough meat on the bone for this. And there should have been. There really should have been for this one.
And yeah, I'm purely coming at this from the angle of I expected to be, really let down, or at least if this would have met my low expectations, I should say, for this film. And the fact that I at least walked out with a genuine smile on my face after watching this, and just, I don't know, just kind of getting sucked up in the last half of the last two acts. I don't know. I really found myself kind of finding the stride and beat with this film. And I don't know. It just worked for me by the end. On a purely entertainment level, I should say. I think that maybe it's the time of year. Maybe it's just that I'm getting into the feels of October, and I think that there are a lot of really beautiful shots in this that definitely give you those October vibes. There's one shot involving a sunset and some shadows. It's gorgeous, I will admit that. And I just think that overall, I got really sucked into the cast, and those are my biggest highlights I can give the film. So I am going to go with worth a watch, just because, again, this is a streaming title now. If this was in theaters, I'd probably be a lot closer to a proceed with caution. But I think the fact that if you already have HBO Max and you're just looking for something to throw on this October and just kind of sit down and just throw something on in the background that you might kind of get sucked into after a little while, I think Salem's Lot's a good one for that. It's unfortunately not the ace in the hole we were looking for a King adaptation. I really think that we've yet to see the ultimate adaptation of this material, but also kind of getting myself more familiarized with the material. It's a hard one. This is going to be a really hard one to adapt. Like we discussed it a little bit, the format of the book, it does leave you with a lot to play with as a writer and a lot to open up, but I can see how that task can get intimidating very quickly. But yeah, I'm going to go with worth a watch. So it's kind of split here, guys. Definitely, you're going to have to let us know how you feel about Salem's Lot. Maybe you're a little bit more on my side and you found some enjoyment in it, or maybe you're right along with Luke where it's just not enough. It's just not enough to spend too much of your time on if you're looking forward to it. But yeah, that's going to wrap us up here. We are still in the throes of Fantastic Fest. Got lots of fun stuff up on the horizon. We just kind of got some more screeners sent to us, so we're kind of rounding out that. And yeah, by the end of the week, this channel is going to be filled with new reviews, but it already has a bunch, so go check them out. So other than that, lots of great stuff coming. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.